If you've worked in social media in the church for any length of time, I would imagine it has often felt like an uphill battle. You've had to learn multiple platforms. You've had to tweak your content to fit specific formats or the strengths of each platform. And you've had to fight endless changes to algorithms that can wipe out your ability to reach people and constantly send you back to the drawing board. Well, even if you've considered yourself to be a skilled designer, photographer, or video editor, even if you've had sufficient tools and resources, even if you've had the full backing of your pastor to develop and deploy your own strategies, it's still a challenge. But today on the MyCom Church Marketing Podcast, we are talking to someone who says the new era of social media that is dawning is one in which churches finally have a massive advantage. And if you can master just one approach to online content, you greatly increase the chances you'll reach people like never before. Thank you to everybody for listening. My name is Dan Wunderlich. I'm a United Methodist pastor, and today's guest is Brady Shearer, the founder and CEO of Pro Church Tools. Brady, thank you so much for being with us today.
Great to be here, Dan. Thanks for the invitation.
Well, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself, how you ended up in the church communication space, and the range of things that you all do for churches these days?
Sure thing. So I did not become a pastor like yourself, Dan, but I did start out with that aspiration. I went to Bible college with the goal of becoming a student pastor, youth pastor. I live in Canada here, so I moved to Edmonton, Alberta, which is the most northern major metropolis in the continent. So, if you've ever seen that show on Discovery, Ice Road Truckers, that's literally our day-to-day lives there. So I completed my degree. I have my degree in theology and youth ministry, but it was in my second year that I began doing an internship at this new church plant in the city, and they gave me the title of media director. And so I was half-time at the church while still doing my full-time studies. And they basically put a camera in my hand and a MacBook and were like, hey, run the social accounts, create some videos, and let's see just where this thing goes. And so I'm kind of like picking up the skills as I go. I was really eager to learn, not too much of a history with creative work, but an aptitude to learn, and a passion for it. So I'm picking up the skills, and then I get back to my classes, Dan, and I see all of my peers, the ones that are going to go on to be student pastors themselves and worship pastors. And I'm thinking, you know what? These are the same people that are also going to be given a camera or the login to the Facebook page and say, hey, you're young, go for it. So I'm like, okay, if I can learn these things, they can as well. So I start this website, prochurchtools.com, and I start teaching everything that I'm learning. And we start a YouTube channel and a podcast called the Pro Church Tools Show. And we're teaching everything that we're learning. And at the same time, this is also at the intersection of me kind of beginning to realize that I just don't have the relational bandwidth to be a full-time pastor, especially to students. They're just going to need more from me than I'm able to give. And so maybe for me, this online ministry is perhaps a better solution. And it kind of really fit perfectly for me. Felt like I was right in my lane. Quickly after, we started releasing products. So we would work directly with churches, client side of things, and we were releasing courses and info products. And then eventually we got into software, which is what we do now as our main product. It's called Nucleus. Nucleus.church is the URL. It's a website builder, online giving platform, church management software, all that kind of good stuff. And we're a team now of about 30 of this company that I run. We've got a location in the States, in Idaho. We got one here in Canada. And then we have about 15 or so just fully remote employees from different countries around the world. So that's a little quick overview of how we got here.
That's awesome. And I resonate some with your story. I was in college when Facebook came across the country to college campuses, and I was studying advertising. And so I am the last cohort of students to learn how to place yellow page ads and newspaper ads and to do like camera ready art. And then at night and on the weekends, I was like trying to learn this Facebook thing, and was in college campus ministry for a decade after that and kind of learned as you went. And I think you've said something similar. One of the things I say is that there are no social media experts. There's only social experts who learn the media. And I feel like you have done that. I warned you ahead of time that I was going to just sing your praises, because I've been along for almost this entire ride from when you all were doing the video announcements to the courses to the things now. My church uses certain aspects of Nucleus. We use the launcher. We subscribe to your stock video, and we have used this approach that we're going to talk about today. And I just felt like now was the perfect time to have you on this show. Number one, to thank you, because I have learned so much. And so if our audience has learned anything from me, they've also in a way learned it from you. But also this new approach that you have really is, I mean, it works. It really works. And we'll talk about it in a little bit. But there really are two parts to today's topic. And I know folks are like, just tell me the format, just tell me the tips so we can start making this type of content. But it's important to understand how it works and why it works. And so maybe let's first lay that groundwork. We have addressed on this podcast over the last couple of months the change that's coming in the shift from social graph to discovery algorithm. But I would love for you to share how you understand this shift happening in your own words.
Sure. I mean, I think it's interesting to trace back a few years and consider the number of competitors that have kind of taken their swing at Facebook
Yeah.
and lost. Whether that
Yeah.
was Snapchat popularizing stories and then Instagram just, gobbling that up, or live streaming platforms that were then like acquired or brought into the platforms. And really the thing about social graph algorithms as we describe them is that they give platforms like Facebook this huge head start because all of your friends and your contacts are in there on Facebook. I mean, we all use Facebook to different degrees, but
Yeah.
one one feature that I think we all can appreciate is when you log into Facebook and they're like, "Hey, this happened 7 years ago," and you're like, "Oh, that was a good time." Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's an expression of the fact that Facebook has been with us for this long. So a new platform comes around and they try to compete in the world of social graph algorithms, and they fail because Facebook is already way bigger with more money, but they also have this huge head start in terms of time.
Yeah.
And so the only way to beat Facebook is not to play their game, but to invent a new game. And the heads of TikTok have said, we are not a social platform. We are an entertainment platform. And the reason I'm going to TikTok is because really they're the ones that popularized what I call discovery algorithms.
Yeah.
Algorithms that populate your news feeds or your For You page, as TikTok calls it, not with content based on your contacts, but content based on your interests and your viewing habits. And TikTok became so popular in this way that Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and now even Twitter have begun deploying their own discovery algorithms, for the most part, all relying on vertical video.
Yeah.
And this is really an important and unique time because now all of these major social platforms are aligned. And if you've worked in social media, you know that one of the biggest challenges is that you create a piece of content and let's say you're ready to publish a carousel on Instagram. And then you're like, well, this carousel won't even work on Facebook and they're owned by the same company.
Yeah.
And I can't bring it to TikTok or Snapchat. And I could turn it into a thread on Twitter, YouTube. No, that doesn't make sense there either. And now I spent 4 hours on this carousel. It's awesome. But I have to do a bunch of extra work to now repurpose that content for all these other platforms because they all have had their own specialties. Well, now they're all incentivizing the same kind of content, which is great for us as churches because now a single vertical video can be published to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. Hey, I'm even experimenting with publishing them to Twitter right now.
Yeah.
And so now a single post is not just like acceptable on every major platform, but is preferred. And that means that, hey, we're in a great place. And it also means that you can do a lot less work to accomplish a lot more.
Well, and one of the things you guys have covered on your podcast, which I highly recommend folks subscribe to the Pro Church Tools podcast. But, for those of us that have been doing it for a while and had it drilled into our heads, don't post the same thing across every platform because people are going to see it 3 or 4 times and they're not going to watch it and they're not going to, they're going to get over it or whatever. But with the discovery algorithm, I think you've termed it this way. Each post is like a lottery ticket, and no one is likely going to see your Instagram reel, your Facebook reel, and your YouTube short all the same because it's going out. In fact, I have an example from our own church, literally the same video posted at the same time. It has 152 views on Facebook. It has 3,243 on Instagram. And so we're not hitting like the hundreds of thousands or millions that some of the folks that have followed this method have. But that's pretty drastically different for the exact same video posted at the exact same time on two different platforms.
It is, and you know what? I've compared it to lottery tickets. I think there's an actually a better analogy, and perhaps it's just the turning of the seasons in this time of year with spring training
Yeah.
happening. But I think it's better to describe each post as an at bat,
Mm,
like in baseball. And the reality is that you're not going to hit a home run or a grand slam every time you're
yeah.
up to bat,
Yeah.
and you're not going to hit a single every time, a double, a triple. The best baseball players in the world fail 2 out of every 3 times that they are up to bat.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how this is. And that's why I like posting that single piece of content to every one of these major platforms, because you never know what the pitcher is going to be throwing when you swing, right? Like so much of baseball is like, look, I'm going to give my best effort. I'm going to have the same approach. I'm going to do like what I'm supposed to do as a hitter, but I don't know if I've got a slider coming at me or a fastball down the, like a lot of it is just having a good approach. And then you kind of let things fall as they may. And it's the same thing here. We can create good systems and good frameworks for creating content that will give us the best chance at wide distribution on these platforms. But yeah, sometimes you're going to post and you're like, man, I thought that was a really good one. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
well. And then other times you'll post, like, really? This one? Okay. And then sometimes you're like, yeah, you know what? I had a good feeling about this one and it goes well. The other interesting thing about these platforms is you can also repost. So you can have a
Yes.
post that flops and you're like, you know what? No, this is a good one. I'm sure of it. You could post it again and it could have dramatically different performance.
Absolutely.
And so it's a new paradigm. And look, I get it. As someone that's been doing social for churches now for 10 years, like, well, since it was a thing you could do, it's frustrating to feel like you are in a rhythm and feel like you have a level of comfortability and then everything changes again. And you've got to relearn a new skill, essentially.
Yeah.
That's what makes social so difficult. It is this confluence of dozens of different skills that all have to be coalescing to create something that can help fulfill your church's mission online. But I also am a firm believer that, hey, we're not going to cry, woe is me, because there are great advantages for churches in this new era of social media, which has historically not been true. And so, as much as it is frustrating to have to go back to the drawing board, we are now privileged in ways we weren't before. And I do think that's a positive.
Absolutely. And like in sports, you'll hear coaches all the time. You have to play around the refs, you have to play around the umps because everyone else is, like both teams on the field are dealing with the same umps. And so every church, every brand, every organization is dealing with the same algorithm stuff. And I know that for some of us, this change might actually feel kind of anxiety ridden because we are used to using things like Facebook to reach our followers, or at least that was our goal, whether we were actually doing it or not over the last couple of years. It's been a greater and greater challenge, to actually get your content in front of people who said, I want to see your content. But my guess too is if you're really panicking over this, you've been wanting to reach those people just to invite them to some in-person ministry, which is really important, right? But social media is not, it never has been the best place for upcoming events or advertising a sermon series just on saying, hey, this is starting. Getting the why behind it is really important. And so maybe the bright side, like the side of this shift we should be looking for, is that this actually gives us the opportunity to do ministry right then and there. And do you think like this discovery algorithm is going to facilitate the doing of ministry more than the inviting of people to ministry?
I mean, hey, if that's a pretty optimistic view, and I'm fine with taking that for sure. I think we've seen churches find ways to continue to promote,
Yeah, true.
irrespective of the tools that these platforms are giving them. But what we're also seeing is people come of age and serve in churches that grew up on social media and are more fluent in the languages of social.
Mm,
And so, what we're just naturally going to see over time is churches become more fluent in the language of social media because the people that are in charge in their churches are like, hey, yeah, I've been doing this for a while since I was, a teenager or a young adult, or I've picked up these skills as I go. But the room and like the space for promotion has continually declined on social media because if you think about why you open your phone to then click on an app,
Yeah.
you're there for recreation for
Yeah.
the most part, right? There can be some educational elements, but a lot of the times it's entertainment, it's recreation. Just, hey, this is a fun feed to scroll. Promotion does not align with that whatsoever. And so there are ways that we can use social media to promote what we're doing in person, but they have to be very, very, well, let's say uncommon, and then also thought out to make sure that we're still aligning with what people are expecting to see. Because at the end of the day, if you do have an event in person that you really care about, you want your promotion for that event to be effective. So then we have to consider where we are promoting these events. And if it's on social, there are just certain, customs and nuances and styles of language that we need to consider and abide by if we hope at all for those posts to be effective.
True. And advertising like a run up to Easter or Christmas or back to school is different than trying to advertise a weekly event. Like when you watch maybe your favorite artist, they may have a season where they're pushing a new album or pushing a tour, or even like you guys, you have a period of time when you release a product or update a product. You might take a period of time that's focused on promotion. But you all are, I've used it on this podcast in the past, the example of Rick Steves, the travel guy, as this perfect content marketing example. Like he has this radio show and a TV show, and it's on YouTube, and he's helping you plan your vacation and getting you excited to go. And basically, like, if you can afford to have someone else do it for you, he's there to do it for you. And I feel like you guys at Pro Church Tools for a decade, you just have been giving away so much for free, and it builds that trust that allows that week of promotion to actually be effective. And so you got to sort of play the long game and not have a silent profile and then just pop on for Easter every year.
Yeah, and to make it practical for churches and church leaders that are listening, in the context of ministry, we like to call these types of promotions. There are sprint promotions and there are sprinkle promotions.
Mm.
And a sprint promotion is like an all out, every channel, we are going to be talking about this thing that we're doing. So earlier this year, we launched a new product, and we, for 7 days straight, basically were like, hey, come and buy this thing,
Yeah.
which is like a really big ask. In marketing, we call it direct response, where you're
Mm-hmm.
basically demanding that the person on the other side make a decision. And you can burn people out on that really fast. It's effective if you have people that trust you and care about your brand, but it has to be done very sparingly. So for us, out of 52 weeks in a year, we might do that once or twice a year.
Mm.
And so in the context of church, we recommend something similar. If you want to do a sprint promotion 1, 2, 3 times per year, great. Do it for Christmas, do it for Easter, do it for VBS or whatever your
Yeah.
big summer event is. But the rest of the year, it's got to be sprinkle promotions. And a sprinkle promotion is where the actual piece of content or the actual creative item that you've made is useful on its own. And then you can add a sprinkle at the end for a promotion as a next step. So to use our example again, the product that we launched is called Social Sermons, where we take a church's sermons, we turn them into videos for social media. Great. So maybe we do a piece of content that talks about how we do this so that a church could do it themselves, right? And then at the end, we say, and by the way, we do this for churches. So if you want us to do it for you, you can go to this website. Well, let's say that was a carousel post or a vertical video. 90% of that content was amazingly useful for the people on the other side of the screen.
Yeah.
So we're following the rules of social, but it could still be effective for, let's say, driving new customers to our products, because at the very end, after we've built that trust and built that rapport, then there is the invitation. And so your church can do the very same thing. Let's say you have baptism coming up. That's a recurring thing that doesn't happen every week, but maybe it happens a few times a year for our churches. If that's the case, what you can do is you can show a story of someone who was baptized in your church. And then at the end of that piece of content, at the end of that announcement, at the end of that carousel or vertical video, you can say, and we're having announcements this time, next month, sign up at this website. And that's a great example of a sprinkle promotion where most people that see that are not going to get baptized. And that's the thing you have to think about. Most people are not going to buy our product. Our audience is tens of thousands of churches. We had 100 spaces for this product. That's all we could accommodate because it was custom work. So we recognize that like a very small fraction of people are going to sign up for this. So how do we make sure that when we're talking about it, it is still useful for people? So it's not just like promotion, advertisement that folks tune out, because then that negatively affects your next thing. And in the same thing at church, let's say you're always doing sprint promotions. Eventually, no one's going to be listening to what you have to say.
Yeah.
And so you have to consider not just this promotion, but the next one. Think about what you're doing now, but think a couple of moves ahead also.
Well, and this may be too soon to know because it isn't fully implemented across the board. But one of the potential wrenches being thrown in the gears of the discovery algorithm, at least here in 2023, is the coming of verified accounts, which cost money. And at least right now, there is some promise of preferential treatment by algorithms, whether it's in content itself or even showing up higher in comments. This started on Twitter, which obviously is in need of raising funds, and some of these other platforms are now talking about instituting it. And so churches are probably going to encounter this more on Facebook or Instagram. You were years ahead of many in this space in seeing the rising power of TikTok. So I'm just kind of wondering if you have any hunches or premonitions around whether this is going to be a big deal, something that churches need to budget for, or just not something to worry about.
Sure. I mean, as far as I know at the time of this recording, it is still not available to us in North America. And when Meta announced it, they said it would be a few weeks. Well, it's been a few weeks and we still don't have it.
Yeah.
So there is a part of me that I don't love making predictions on social because so much changes and there's
Right.
so much opportunity right now. I try not to think too far ahead because then I might miss what's right in front of me. A lot of us come from mature industries, like real estate or working in church, or there's education and there's government work, and a lot of these things have been around for a very long time. And so change is hard in those places. So you kind of like to predict about what's next because that's sometimes the best way that you can make ground. In social, things are changing so fast. It's hey, just focus on now. That's all you need. But with that caveat aside, I think that this does represent a very, very big change. And there are a few different thoughts that come to mind when I think about it. One is that, if you're not paying for a product, that typically means that you are the product.
Right.
So on social media, we get to use Facebook as users for free. Why? Because data of ours is being collected to then advertise to us. And this profit model has a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. If you introduce a system where you now have to pay to use the product, even though most everyday users won't care if they're showing up in search. Well, creators do. This dramatically changes the entire ecosystem of Meta. As for the fallout of what that means, I'm actually not certain because I think it's such a dramatic change that you could really go down any number of rabbit holes to consider what the fallout might be. But if nothing else, you have to consider that this isn't just now we get to pay. Some creators will pay. No. It will fundamentally introduce a class system amongst creators where either you are a professional, you're paying the fees to actually be there, or you're an amateur. Because what's been great about social media, for me, when I was 21 starting my company, is that I could basically send emails for free and create a Facebook for free and jump on Instagram for free. And all of these things were essentially free. And that was because there was no barrier to entry. As long as I could had my time and my effort, I could make it happen. Well, if you introduce a barrier to entry of hey, it's it's $15 a month for Facebook, it's $15 a month for Instagram. Now it's $30 a month to be a creator. For some people that will be a no-brainer. For a lot of creators, though, it won't be. That'll be okay. No, that's too much, especially because I've become accustomed to this being free. And now what that means is that people might feel incentivized to not post because they might feel well, why would I post? I'm not paying for Meta Verified. I know that's going to affect my distribution. I might as well not even post at all, right? Because going back to that at bat analogy, at least we all feel hey, you know what? I have an at bat and I am we'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But this is kind of that the umpire is gonna just not call the way that you expect things to be called. The game is rigged. And that might just be, well, I'm not gonna get up here and swing at all. What's the point?
Yeah.
So then that's an interesting fallout as well.
Awesome. Well, we'll put a pin in that and see what happens. And like you said, they were all it's coming, and then it hasn't been coming. And then there have been things that have rolled out on one platform and then gotten rolled back when people just, revolt. And so we'll see what happens. Maybe the last sort of 30,000 foot before we jump into the post format, this vertical video social sermon format that you've been teaching. For me, it comes around a question of locality. Like, obviously, we want to serve whomever God sends our way. And if that includes people across our region, across the country, or even around the world because of these new discovery algorithms, then that's great. Let's go where the people are. But we also all want to reach our local community, if for no other reason than they're easier to serve and support and build, maybe eventually in-person relationships with when it's needed. In your experience so far, do you feel like locality is built into the discovery algorithm? Are there any tips or tricks to help your posts show up more locally?
There definitely is a local geographic element to these discovery algorithms, for sure in TikTok, but it also seems like in Meta's algorithms as well. I got a DM from a church yesterday, and they have been seeing success with posting their social sermons. And they said, "quote It's so cool because not only have these reels reached a lot of people online, but it's also opened up opportunities for our pastor to talk to people in our community about the gospel because they recognize him from our reels."
That's awesome.
And I've seen this happen with TikTok. I remember hanging out with a buddy of mine who had a big TikTok following, and he lived on one of the smaller islands in Hawaii. And there's a geographical element to the algorithm of TikTok. And so we went to Target, and people are just coming up to him like, "Hey, are you that guy that preaches on TikTok?" Because there's only let's say 10,000, 100,000 people that live on the island.
Yeah.
And so there's just such a smaller amount of people. They're seeing more of his content because there are fewer creators. And so density of where you live and population density, that would matter. But that DM from the church would suggest that there's now a local element on the Instagram side as well. And I think this makes a lot of sense. I mean, for my business, it's not especially helpful, especially because most of my audience is American and I'm Canadian. But for churches, this is great news because it becomes a lot easier to sell to our senior leaders or even to ourselves. Okay, I'm investing this time online, which is great. How does that affect what we're doing offline here in person? And now we're starting to see more of these stories where there does seem to be a local element. And there are so many good reasons to be following this system that we're assuredly about to share with you. But this is just one more to stack on top of the pile.
That's awesome. That is so encouraging. I'm so glad to hear you say that, because that's been the thing that has, just to me seemed like a black box part of the algorithm is are we just going to start being blasted out across the country and across the world? It's nice to hear that there's evidence coming in, even if it's only anecdotal at this point, that there's a locality to it. And we are going to pause the conversation right there. I know you're excited to get to this specific post format and strategy that is helping churches reach more people online than ever before. But trust me, there was enough there in part one that we need to spend a little bit of time thinking about and reflecting on. Understanding this shift in social media and what it means for us and our ministries is vitally important. So hang in there. Next month, we're going to deliver part two of my conversation with Brady, and we're going to get into all of those details. But now I want to hear from you. Have you noticed this shift on social media, either in your own work or your own personal engagement with platforms? What kinds of things are you seeing now that you don't remember being a big part of social media in the recent past? You can email us at podcast@umcom.org, and we just might share your thoughts or stories on a future episode. And you can, of course, use that email, podcast@umcom.org, to send us any feedback or topic suggestions you have for the show. We always love hearing from you. And as always, the easiest way to support the show and to help other church communicators like yourself find it is by sharing this episode with your friends and colleagues, and by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever service you're listening to right now. And did you know that United Methodist Communications has celebrated over 80 years of ministry? Your support ensures that the latest denominational news, dynamic stories, and informative articles will continue to connect our global community. Make a tax-deductible donation today at resourceumc.org/giveumcom. Thanks again for listening to the MyCom Church Marketing